So my name is Pulin. I work at Change.org. I'm a senior campaigner there. I've worked at Change.org for about 2.5 years. Prior to that, I worked at PETA for about 9 years, where I worked on the college program. I worked on the PETA 2 Street team, which does youth outreach work, and I manage the regular action team, which works with activists. You can see their table out there and learn all about it. The interesting thing about what I do now is I'm actually not here to tell you what you should or shouldn't believe in terms of specific issues. I definitely have very strongly held beliefs, but I'm here because Change.org is a platform, and a lot of the way I look at using social media and online resources is more about sort of best practices that have been used for other campaigns, whether it's within animal rights or other movements, and what the best practices are and what tips I can offer to you, so when you decide you want to run a campaign, you can be more effective. So first, why should you care about online organizing? So it's other than the fact that it's free, it's fast, it's easy to use. Why are platforms useful when there are so many advocacy groups out there? I already talked a lot about what Mercy for Animals are doing. Some of you here do work for Mercy for Animals, because I can see, but most of you don't. And so if you don't work for Mercy for Animals, there are some, or another organization like that, who maybe you're not doing your own investigations, maybe you're not with your own publication or something like that. What are the sort of opportunities that are available to you as an individual that these social media platforms can provide? That's some of the stuff I want to talk about. So there are a few things. For one thing, you can track your progress using any sort of social media, online campaigning, things like Change.org, Kickstarter, YouTube, anything like that. A lot of what I'm going to say is kind of obvious, but it's conferences like this that give us the opportunity to take a step back and start realizing that if we sort of take for granted there are these really easy ways to assess what we're doing and whether or not it's effective. So for example, you want to track your progress. Everybody would say, of course you want to track your progress, that's a ridiculous thing. But how many people in this room are saying, hey, I posted something with this photo, how did it do? Like, did it reach more people than a different photo when I posted something about factory farming? Like, did a photo of a pig do better than a photo of a chicken? Or did a photo of a happy animal do better than a photo of a sad animal? These are things that we often don't think about, but we should, because if you're trying to be more effective and reach more people with the message that you want them to get, then of course you need to track from one thing to the next how you're doing. Same thing with something like shares. So for this photo, I was actually looking at the Animal Equality page yesterday, and I was like, because I know their social media reaches a lot of people, so I was like, what is something on their site that seems to have done well lately? And so this is a video where basically, I don't think they created it, but it was like a dog who, maybe they did, but it was a dog who thinks this statue is a human, so he's running back and forth trying to play with him. It's really, really cute. And you can see it has 40,000 shares. And the cool thing that they did is that not only did they share the video, which they just thought people might be interested in, even though it doesn't have a direct tie-in to their specific campaigns, but they shared something that they thought their community might be interested in, and they included a link so people, when they're sharing it and when they're just seeing this in general, can find out how they can like their page and get more involved with what they're doing. It's a very simple, quick way to do it, but like we've been talking about, you want to give people opportunities not just to see what you're getting out there, but to actually engage with the content that you're creating or that you're sharing. So that could be something as simple as putting a link to your own Facebook page if you want them to go there. It could be something as simple as, instead of saying, here's a vegan recipe, and posting a photo of it, it could be something as simple as saying, here's a vegan recipe. Do you have a favorite vegan recipe? That's much more likely to get people to comment with what their favorites are. Little things like that go a really long way. So that's just one example. The other thing that, again, something often people take for granted is every time you do something on social media, you're creating these relationships and these communities around shared values and experiences. So for example, if you think of a petition, let's say you did a petition on Change.org, it gets 500 people to sign. Maybe you think that's a lot, maybe you think it's little. Regardless of what you think, that's 500 people who you brought together around a common issue, but you can then re-engage with other things. So maybe those 500 people, you can send them something that says, thanks for signing, now here's how you can make a phone call to help, here's how you can join our organization, here's how you can donate some money, you can just keep engaging people. And it's something that often people say oh, I posted this on Facebook, or I have this page, or I have this YouTube video, and I got a whole bunch of views, but they don't think like these are individuals who are watching these things, who are engaging with what you're doing, and it's really important to take a step back and say, before you even put that online, like what is your goal? What are you trying to do with those people once they do view your content, once they're part of what you're doing? Like, is that the end of what you want them to do, or is there something else you want to offer them? And so oftentimes, you know, again, like you don't necessarily need to be part of an organization to think through that way. You just need to think like, what are you trying to do? What is your goal? And like, what is your next step or next few steps after posting that one piece of content? That's not to say you shouldn't post like silly cat videos and things like that, but when you're talking about like more of like a pure campaigning sort of perspective, that's really important to keep in mind. And then as Ari also already said, it's really important, like it's called social media. It's not called like sit in your room and be like grumpy and like post sad photos. You know, it's social media. You want to engage people. You want to start conversations. You want to be part of conversations. You want to leave positive comments when there's something positive to say. If you have something maybe critical to say, maybe you could still say it, but maybe send it as a private message, because you can still have that discussion, but do it in a way that's going to be productive. The next thing is experimentation. So this is really important. Ari was talking about Upworthy. Can you raise your hand if you've heard of Upworthy? Nice. So that's a lot more than the last conference I was at, but to your credit. So Upworthy, the interesting thing about them is, and I had a slide for a different thing where I had a little bit more time, but they test, I believe it's like somewhere like 20, 25 different titles for the different content they have. So when you think, wow, that was a really interesting, like compelling title, it didn't just happen that way. They have people who like sit in a room, they say, this is the post I want people to see, but what is going to get them to click on it to actually like engage with what that content is? It's the same thing that a lot of people do for traditional kind of like email marketing, where they like, we do this at change.org, for example, where we will have an email that we want to test out, and we won't just test one subject line, we'll probably test at least 4 different subject lines. Sometimes we'll test those subject lines plus, let's say, a happy animal image and a sad animal image. So we'll really be able to see what's going to get to the most people. If you are an individual and you don't necessarily, you know, like have a reason to get into that much detail, don't worry about it. But if you have an organization, you'd be surprised how much those small percents that they get, like an open rate or engagement rate, can really add up over time. Because again, you're trying to build communities, you're trying to be part of a movement and build these movements, and you can only build things if you take time to like reassess how you're doing and continue to be able to show that you're actually progressing and not just doing things because you think that's what you're supposed to do because everybody else does it. Storytelling is also really, really important, and this is actually one of the key things that we do at change.org, where we encourage people, because you're individuals, so like, I'm not going to have everybody do this, but if you were to turn to the person next to you and just ask them why they think animal rights is important, you'd probably hear a slightly different story about like how they got to this point, how they got to the conference, maybe the first video they've ever seen, like what the first book is they read, anything like that. So everybody has a different story, you all live in different places, and that's really important. That's a powerful thing. That's something that, let's say you want to pressure a particular decision maker to make a change. If you're all coming at it from a different perspective and telling your story in an authentic way, it's really hard for that company, that decision maker, that politician to kind of brush you off. If you're like a consumer, let's say Walmart, you know, like if you shop at Walmart and then you're signing a petition that MFA has about gestation crates, or you want to start your own petition about something, like it's going to carry a lot more weight if they know that you're an actual legitimate customer, rather than saying, hey, a bunch of vegans want KFC to offer like a vegan bucket of chicken. It's like, they don't really go there right now, so you know, why does that matter? So not to say you couldn't do that petition, but you would really need to like make the case for why that would make sense. And that's all sort of like the art of storytelling, which go to the front of change.org, look through some of the petitions, you'll see that they all pretty much have a really distinct story about why it matters, and I'll get into that in a minute. And then the last thing, just to mention specifically about this, is that it is really important to listen and adapt. So, you know, again, like the goal is not to say, this is who I am, and everybody needs to agree with me, and this is what you have to see. I would say that probably at least half, if not more of the time that you spend on social media should be actually just like taking time to listen to what people are doing, watch what they're doing, seeing what's effective at places like Upworthy, BuzzFeed, Veg News, Mercy for Animals, Like, see what's working for them. That doesn't necessarily mean it works for you, because again, you're an individual, your organization is different than theirs. So, but you need to think, like, what's your story, how are you going to engage with people, and listen to what people are leaving in terms of comments. You don't need to listen to people who are trolling, but if somebody disagrees with the way you're doing something as an organization or as an individual, like, for example, if you are an individual who posts, let's say, 10 posts a day with graphic photos of factory farming, and people on your family are like, this is like traumatizing me. You don't say like, this is great, I want them to be traumatized so they go vegan. You might want to say, oh, well, my goal is not to like turn them off, it's actually to like get them to be part of this. And so like, listen, take time, say, okay, well maybe these people are not, like they're seeing it, but maybe that's not actually resulting in what you want to accomplish. So take a step back, figure out maybe instead of a sad animal image, if there's a happy animal image, or maybe posting a little less frequently, or posting with a little bit of like text that explains why to you it's important, instead of just saying, here's a bunch of MFA investigations. You can say, this is the investigation that made me want to go vegan, or here's something that was in my nightly news that like I just wanted to share with you. So you're making it more personal, so they have more of an opportunity to connect with you, rather than feel like you're just like coming at them. You're listening, you're giving things that they can kind of interact with. This I had to add just because it's like a cheap way to get some like people excited, because Will Potter did a great job with his Kickstarter campaign. Perfect example of social media, the power of people to come together. He had this campaign for this like investigative work that he wants to do with drones. Raised a whole bunch of money. He didn't raise a whole bunch of money because of like big huge companies. He raised money because of people like you, just individuals who saw what he's doing. Maybe they followed him before, maybe this is the first time they've like followed his work, but they like read his story, they thought it was credible, they saw what the concerns were, what he wanted to do about it, how they can be part of it in like a very active way, and then they had opportunities to get involved. So he did a great job with his storytelling, he did a great job giving people who saw the issue, he did a great job of getting them a way to get involved, and then raised well over what his goal was. And actually, I was just talking to a friend who is here, who was saying that Kickstarter actually, when they look at some of these like numbers, they actually, what is often of most interest to them is not necessarily the amount of money raised, but it's like the number of backers. So it's not that 75,000 or actually more than that ended up being raised. It's that like 1,300 individuals felt so passionately about this issue that not only like obviously more than 13,000 people or 1,300 people saw this. But it's not just that they saw it, that they actually decided to give some money and become part of it. And that's a really kind of powerful thing that wouldn't have been able to happen before all of the like online campaigning sorts of opportunities. So specifically for Change.org, one of the, basically the way we look at the types of users, the people who use Change.org, there are 4 different kinds of ways I generally break it down. One is that they're individual members of the public. So that's both people who start petitions and those who sign petitions. They're organizations, so organizations like Mercy for Animals. They're decision makers. This one I really want to stress, like when you're talking about platforms or really any sort of campaign, decision makers are a really key part of you trying to win your campaign. If you look at it as an antagonistic campaign where they're the enemy and you're like the good guys, that's going to be really hard to bring it to the point that you can sit down and have a discussion. If you're always yelling at them and you're always demonizing them and you're always like getting people to hate on them, then what incentive are you giving them to sit down with you and have a discussion about what you want to change and how they can like sort of be part of the solution rather than always being seen as part of the problem? So looking at decision makers as potential allies or as potential, really looking at them as the key to you making the change you want to see is important, because the fact is they're the decision makers and they have the power to make the change. You need to give them the incentive and all the reasons to make them change. And then media is also really important. I like without a doubt, if you get stories in the media, the PR companies for these big companies or like the legislators will pay attention to them. It will reach more people because as people read about issues, then for campaigns, they'll find out opportunities how to get involved. That's why the quick, easy tip for any organization out there or anybody running a campaign, if you have a website, a Facebook group, Twitter account, pick one of those when you're doing an interview, and always make sure that you include a little soundbite that says, this is what we're doing. If people want to get involved, go to this website, this Twitter handle, whatever. If you don't do that, you're not giving people who are reading or watching any avenue to take additional action. So I always do that. And then the benefit of online organizing is that you have opportunities, again, to assess how you're doing with your work. So I'm not going to go through every single one of these things, but something as simple as adding a photo or video on a petition when we've done some analysis of petitions on change.org. Something as simple as that increases your likelihood of winning that campaign by 7 times. That's a lot. Sometimes people are like, I don't know, I just want to do something really quick, and they get a little lazy with it. It's like, come on. Especially for animal issues, there are really compelling photos and videos out there to represent what happens to animals. It's up to you to take a little bit of extra time to find what best represents what's happening and what you want the solution to be, and make sure that's in there. Another quick thing which often surprises people is that 40% of petitions actually win with less than 200 signatures. So oftentimes people think, wow, I need to get like hundreds of thousands of signatures to make a change. In fact, I live in DC, a local issue was that there was the National Park Service was trying to block concerts at this place called Fort Reno, which has done concerts for years and years. And in part, there was a petition that got, I think, just like a few thousand signatures, and that helped, that was in the media, it got people engaged. So instead of being passive, sort of readers of the media, they were active participants in making this change happen and asking the National Park Service to allow the concert series to happen. And of course, there was a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff from the concert organizers, and they ended up actually winning the campaign. So again, that's not the sort of thing where the National Park Service needed to be bombarded by tens or hundreds of thousands of signatures. It's just a quick, easy way to show that in addition to the behind-the-scenes meetings that were happening, that the public was getting involved. Something as simple as sitting at your computer reading what a campaign is about, adding your signature, really goes a long way. And I can't tell you how many reporters I've talked to who say, oh yeah, in addition to the signatures, they read through the comments when you sign a petition. So don't say if there's a factory farming petition, don't sign it and say, go vegan. You can do it if you want, but leave a more compelling, thoughtful comment, and chances are that other people will read it and be inspired by it, or the media might even pick up on it. And again, I can't tell you how many reporters I've talked to who actually say, I read these petitions, but in addition to that, it's the comments that are really compelling. It could be people whose families were farmers, or if it's a healthcare issue, people who's who have had family members with cancer, or a health issue, or anything like that. And so there are all these sorts of examples where, again, the benefit of online organizing and social media is that you can really be authentic, and if you're not doing that, you're not taking full advantage of what you're trying to do. Also, for Change.org, we do send emails to the decision makers, so if you have a petition that exists right now, or if you're thinking of one in the future, you can actually try to look up, or contact me, maybe I can try to help you, look up the email for a particular company or decision maker, and it will start generating emails to them. Again, because you're not trying to just shut down their email, you're just trying to let them know that there's this pressure. What we do is we sort of have certain benchmarks that they get emails. So they get an email at first when you start your petition that says, hey, somebody started a petition, here's what the issue is, here's how you can respond to them. And then it just sends them maybe the first 50 or so, and then maybe every 100 or so after that it says, here's the update, here are the comments, things like that. So, because again, if you're a big company, sure, you don't want 100,000 people emailing you, but at the same time, after 200 people email you, it's on your radar, you get the point, and you can see publicly that the number of signatures keeps rising. What good is it really going to do for you unless you want to just be totally disruptive to keep sending them emails? And the fact is, once people do sign it, you can always send them a message with an additional ask, like a phone call to the corporate office for people who are especially interested in politely conveying their point of view, or if you have a fundraising ask or anything like that. Okay, so then there are other key things you want to think about. This is not just for online campaigns, these are tips for every sort of campaign. You want to think of what your timeline is. Ari already talked about that. If you time something the right way, who knows what nightly news program you might end up on. You want to think about your stories. I've already talked about that. You want to be very authentic. The other thing that's really important is to really be clear, and this is especially when you're doing a petition, but like you need to tell people why their signature matters. Or if you're doing fundraising, you need to tell them like, why does their support matter? There is this, I work at Change.org, I have for 2.5 years. I'm not like oblivious to the fact that people think that petitions might be like a slacktivist sort of thing. My challenge to you is like, don't sign the ones that you think are stupid in the same way that you wouldn't go to a protest that you think is stupid. There are good ways to do things and there are bad ways to do things. If you think a protest is dumb because people are doing something silly at it, don't go to it. If you think a petition is in your inbox or in your like Twitter feed or Facebook and you read it and you say like, I get that animals are suffering, but I have no clue why like my signature will matter on this, you don't have to sign it. And so the challenge should be not to think like, why not sign this? It should be for you as the person starting a campaign or really like initiating the campaign to say like, I'm going to be clear in what I'm writing why somebody should sign this and why that signature will matter. And so if you do that in the right way, you're telling this compelling, authentic story, then the people who are being part of your community around that campaign are also not just a bunch of people who click on things because why not? It's the people who are like, wow, this really makes a lot of sense. I want to be invested in this campaign in some way. I want to keep working at it so it gets to a victory, and then that's really important. You also, of course, like I said, you want to tell a decision maker why they should listen to you, and you want to think also just in general what your strengths are and who your allies are in terms of these campaigns. So just really quickly, I wanted to go through some examples of just some campaigns on Change.org that have been really successful or really interesting. So this one, I don't know if any of you know Jennifer Mischler, but she's great. A few years ago, she did a petition because Atlantic City was going to reopen a horse diving sort of thing as part of like a nostalgic thing that they were going to do. So Jennifer heard about it, she started her own petition, and she found a compelling image. Like the title of it is pretty like ridiculous sounding, so of course a lot of people clicked on it. And then what she did is for the targeting, she made sure it went to all of the Atlantic City, I think like the board of directors for the boardwalk or something like that. So everybody who had a vested interest in the overall redevelopment were getting emails about how people didn't want this particular thing to happen. So it created this sort of like peer pressure within there to the person who was like the ultimate decision maker. And it was very urgent, timely, like you knew exactly when the boardwalk was gonna reopen, and it gave people like the sense like we have to do something now. If you just say, hey, there's this campaign, you should get involved, with no urgency, it's less exciting. Another thing is, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Kathy Freston. She's a great author who writes a lot about veganism and health. She actually, so it's funny I mentioned the KFC campaign, she is vegan. She doesn't make any doesn't pretend like she's not. But she has a petition that has more than 100,000 signatures asking McDonald's to offer a veggie burger. And if you were to ask me before she launched her campaign, do you think 100,000 people will sign a petition asking McDonald's to offer like a vegan option? I would have been like, I don't think so. That's like, do vegans want to go there or what? But as it turns out, not only did the media really like the story and actually report on it really positively, but 100,000 people signed it. And if you, again, going back to the comments, if you read the comments on that petition, it's people who, some of whom are vegan, some of whom are vegetarian. I'm not saying every vegan or vegetarian has to love this campaign. Again, we're a platform, so people can do what they want. But there are people who are like, oh, I go there, like my kid goes there on field trips, so my kid is vegetarian or vegan, and like it would be great for them to have this option. Or people who are like, yeah, like I'm busy at work, and like that is the place that coworkers go, and it would be great to have that option. Or people who just say, yeah, I wanted to do meatless Mondays, and this is why it's a good option. So again, it's a lot of it's about listening, because if we only think about what we want and the way we want it, and we don't think like, what are other people doing? Like, sure, there are people who aren't at this conference who like they have other perspectives, and they might still agree with you ultimately on what they want to accomplish, but they might have a different way of trying to accomplish it. So it's really important to talk to people about why their signatures matter and sort of tell it from that perspective. I'll be really quick now, because I do want to make sure we have at least like 10 or 15 minutes for questions. So, drawing visuals tell the story. We've already gone through this, but this is just a great example of how Mercy for Animals puts, they don't just tell people about their investigations, they always say like, so here's something you can do. Sometimes it's like a pledge to a vegetarian or vegan, sometimes it's a petition like this, but there's always something, so you're not just watching. You're being encouraged to share, you're being encouraged to sign a petition, something like that, so that you're being part of the movement rather than just sort of a passive person saying, oh, that's so horrible, I wish I could do something. Ari also already mentioned influential allies, things on Twitter. This is a less polite tweet from Kate Mara, who's great. She's on House Cards and a bunch of other things. But this is one of the tweets about the Walmart gestation crate campaign. Then this is really cool because actually Twitter was so impressed by probably many of you in this room who were tweeting about Blackfish that they wrote an official Twitter blog. So this isn't a blog because PETA did something or because Sea Shepherd did something. This is a blog that was because their users, their average users, people like you in this room, were so fired up after watching Blackfish that they made this happen, where there's this huge spike of how people were talking about it. And this graphic, again, this is not like a change.org graphic, it's not from an organization, this is from Twitter. They were so impressed with what people were doing. Not only were they impressed, but Willie Nelson ended up canceling his SeaWorld performance. Again, he canceled not because people said, I hate you, you should cancel. They said, hey, we're fans and this is disappointing and maybe you want to reconsider. And he actually went on CNN and said, yeah, it's because of petitions and the fact that he just doesn't agree with the way animals are treated. That's why he canceled. And then that sort of snowballed into this effect where we created this whole page where so many people were starting their own petitions around Blackfish that we just put it all on this hosting page. Then it translated into this also, which included some offline action, which maybe some of you here might even be in, because I think this was from, I think this is San Diego. So some people took the online petition and turned it into offline action, which is also really great. So, like I mentioned, Change.org is a platform, and so our goal is to empower people everywhere to make the changes they want to see in the world. So you might have one approach towards how you think people can help animals. The person sitting next to you might have a different one. My perspective is, as long as people are doing something, ultimately things will work out for the best. As long as you're telling compelling, authentic stories and giving people the opportunities to get involved, because what we're really trying to do is level the playing field. So regular people have the same amount of power and potential to reach just as many people. Some quick resources that I just wanted to mention. So this is at change.org, we have tips and guides that anybody is free to use, or you can contact me anytime. Mashable is also a great site that talks about social media a lot, so I would definitely encourage you to go there. They have a special section about social media. Vocus is a company that does a lot of PR sorts of work, and they have great tips and guides that you can download. They have social media cheat sheets for all the different platforms, totally free. Again, as part of listening, I would encourage you not just to follow change.org on Twitter, but Upworthy, Mashable, BuzzFeed, and follow your local reporters. If you have a local organization or if you're a local activist and you want to get in your local news, you should see what local reporters are talking about. You shouldn't pitch your local weatherman a story about vegan recipes. That doesn't make any sense. But you should, if you do see that there's somebody who wrote a story about healthy living, you might want to follow them, and next time your organization is doing a Meatless Mondays thing or a vegan feed-in or something, you might want to just send them a tweet or then look up their email address and say, hey, I know you were concerned about health issues and you've covered them before. Here's a quick story idea for you. Let me know if you're interested. So these are quick ways to take online actions and turn them to offline results. And don't forget, YouTube has videos for basically just about everything. You don't have, just think in your mind of the most ridiculous thing, write it down, go home and see if there's a video about it, and I bet you there is. So if you could do it for ridiculous things, you could do it for things that actually matter and will make a difference. So I will just close with this image which a friend made for me, which is ridiculous and silly, but I liked to include it. And it's got my email, my Facebook, and my Twitter on it. I know that I think this is the last session of your day, and there's a banquet after this, so I think me rambling right now is standing between you and the banquet. So talking really slow might be this is so frustrating. But we have, I think, about 10 or so minutes for questions, in addition to the time that we'll be here. And in the spirit of social media, and trying to encourage people not to ramble, honestly, what we want people to do is, if you have questions, try to pretend you're on Twitter and try to keep it short and to the point. And that way more people will get more time to ask questions and hear what everybody else has to say. So you can leave if you would like, but if you have any questions, definitely feel free. Thank you.